Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Matt Fakhoury. Thank you so much
for
being here in person.
Thank you for having me.
You and I were just talking during the break, the movies that we loved of Rob Reiner. I mean, people are following this case closely. What options are on the table for arraignment today?
So an arraignment, a few things happen at an arraignment. First and foremost, the judge is going to read the formal charges against Nick Reiner. He's going to say you're charged with murder, 2 counts, 1 for his father, Rob, 1 for his mother, Michelle. He's going to read line by line, word for word, what the charges are and the potential penalties of it, which here are life in prison. The judge is also going to ask him for a plea. What are you pleading to this charge? Typically, 99% of the time in a situation like this, it's very early on, he's going to plead not guilty. Now, that can change.
Did we see insanity today, or too early for that?
Probably too early.
Okay.
But what can happen is that procedurally, they can ask for what we call an examination, a mental health examination, which would potentially set him up for the insanity defense down the line. And then the last thing the judge is going to want to know who's representing him, right?
Yes.
Your old attorney, I believe it was
Alan Jackson.
Alan Jackson withdrew. We don't know why, by the way, he withdrew, but he withdrew.
And that was weird, right? I mean, this attorney represented Karen Reed, Harvey Weinstein. He said, I have to recuse myself for reasons I'm not going to state out loud. Does that come down to money, you think? Nick Reiner couldn't afford him?
It could be money. It could be some type of conflict of interest. I don't know, and we'll probably never know because there are ethical rules that prevent us from knowing what's going on with them, right? But, I mean, it's very common for attorneys to withdraw. I've withdrawn on very high-profile cases at times. Sometimes it just doesn't work out.
The other thing that I thought was interesting that Alan Jackson said was he said, I can't represent him, but I can tell you under California law that he's not guilty. How did you read between the tea leaves there? What did that mean?
Insanity defense. That's really their only option here, right? You don't need to be a legal expert to figure that out. What insanity means is that the defendant, Nick, in this case, was suffering from a mental health defect that rendered him unable to appreciate the nature of what occurred, right? That's really the only way to go because his history points in that direction. He was very unstable the last few years. He had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. From my understanding, he suffered from a serious substance abuse problem as well. All that might be a good setup for an insanity defense in this case.
We know he was taken off of suicide watch. You know, in that first hearing, we saw all the illustrations, him in the suicide jacket or vest, but we're told he's no longer on suicide watch. I'm curious, how does media attention affect a case like this? When a lot of the world is watching, how does that expedite things or just kind of change the stakes at play?
It puts a lot of pressure on the prosecutors more than anything, right?
Okay.
You know, when you're a defense attorney or when you're a defendant in the case, the world's against you anyway, right? In situations like this, I think you keep a close look on the prosecutors and how they're handling this case, kind of like, you know, other high-profile cases that we've all dealt with, especially out in California, in the LA area. So I think that there's going to be a little bit more pressure on the prosecutors to do what they need to do in this case.
And then just before I let you go, next steps after this arraignment today and when you think a trial may take place, if at all?
A trial could take place. Again, when you're talking about insanity, it's the lesser of two evils, right? Because if they win on an insanity defense at trial, he's essentially civilly committed for the rest of his life, potentially. And if he loses the insanity defense, he's probably going to be found guilty of murder, of 2 counts of murder, which at the very least is going to be a life sentence times 2. Right? So we don't know where this is going yet. Maybe they could work out a deal. However, I do think this is probably going to go to trial and they're going to plead the affirmative defense of insanity.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching closely today. Matt Fakhoury, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
your time.
Thank you
really
for having me.
appreciate it. And we'll have you back on soon,
Thank you.
I imagine. Okay.